In this week's episode, we're going to be exploring more of those beautiful waterfalls in central Pennsylvania while highlighting 5 things you should have when photographing waterfalls, no matter where you are in the world. Let's get started. One of the most important traits of a good waterfall photo is some of that creamy, dreamy flow. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alex, how can I get some of that creamy, dreamy flow of my own? Well, it's simple. You just need to purchase my 200-hour course. I'm totally kidding. The key is shutter speed. You've got to slow down your shutter speed just enough to stop freezing the motion of the water and let it flow in your exposure. Depending on the speed of the water, you might want a shutter speed ranging anywhere from 1/10 of a second to a full 2 seconds. That's over 4 stops of light difference. And while we can adjust our aperture and ISO to get the shutter speed we need, sometimes, typically it's far too bright to accomplish those long shutter speeds. That's where a set of neutral density, or ND filters, comes in. ND filters are simple. They just darken the light that enters your lens, typically in increments of 3 stops, 6 stops, and 10 stops, giving you the ability to manipulate the exposure triangle with another variable. While they do come in many different variations, shapes, and sizes, these are the stop values you're going to encounter most often. My preferred system of choice are these circular magnetic ND filters made by Maven. I've also used multiple sets of square drop-in filters that accomplish the same task with varying benefits and hindrances, but personally, nothing beats the accessibility and convenience of using a magnetic filter kit. Not only can you fit the entire kit in this 3D printed case, but they are also color coordinated, so you know exactly what you're using, which can come in handy when you might be stacking multiple filters like this shot, or trying to faff about in front of a waterfall. I'll have these linked down below if you're interested. While some of the items in here aren't as necessary as others, this isn't an item you can go without if you want dreamy waterfall photos. You don't necessarily need an entire kit of ND filters and can likely get away with just a 3-stop ND at a minimum. A 3-stop filter is what I find myself using most often, but flexibility for any given situation is important, and for that I would recommend at least having a 3-stop and 6-stop filter.
By the side of the road, everybody knows, yeah. Strange decisions by the folks in the know. They're in control. Give me what you got. It's not a lot. You gotta give me what I need, 'cause I wanna survive. Give me what you got. It's not a lot. You gotta give me what you got.
Next up might be even more important than an ND filter, which is a polarizer. Something so important that I actually just made an entire video on why you must have one for waterfall photography, along with other numerous tips, tricks, and examples of images that wouldn't be possible without one. And without repeating myself too much from that video, a polarizer will help you control the reflections on surfaces, foliage, and water. It's an indispensable tool that cannot be replicated in post-processing, and without exaggeration, it's going to enable you to take images that you couldn't before. Again, if you want more information on that, be sure to check out that video. I'll have it linked right above. The next thing you'll want to be able to do is get into the water. In many cases, that might just be taking your shoes off and getting a little wet, but it can be really useful to have a proper pair of footwear to get into the water. For me, that's a pair of 𝐒𝐸𝐴𝐽 that won't go floating away for those warmer water days, and I also have a pair of waders for colder and deeper water, but I really haven't used those here on the East Coast, and it's only for extreme cases. You'll notice here in Pennsylvania, I'm barefoot for this shot, which actually doubled up on cooling my feet off after a long hike. Getting in the water can open up much more interesting compositions and perspectives. You just need to be careful in whatever situation you find yourself in. Some areas don't allow people to be in the riverbeds, Sometimes the current is far too strong to risk getting into the water, and you'd have to be an idiot to get into freezing water like this. Many compositions come to life with just a few steps into the water, like this one, while also giving me a leg up, or in this case, a leg in for more unique shots of some areas.
Strange people living in the mausoleums.
Next up is a few items or apps that will come in really handy when photographing waterfalls. You're going to want a lens cloth, preferably microfiber, to wipe away any of that moisture you might get on the front of your lens. I'd suggest a couple depending on the type of waterfall you might be photographing. Next up, you're going to want an app to help predict the alignment of the sun. Both TPE and PhotoPills do a great job at this, and I highly recommend them for many types of photography, but in this case, you'll find with a lot of waterfalls, the sun doesn't rise and fall at the basic hours of sunset and sunrise. You can use these apps to predict when the sun will show up for any particular waterfall shot you might be trying to capture. Speaking of apps, your phone is a great tool to check out compositions before going through the motions of taking your camera out of the bag and setting up. I do this constantly, no matter what I'm photographing, but especially in waterfall scenes where I use a wide-angle lens to see how a waterfall might present itself in a composition, or I use the telephoto lens to see if I might want to switch between lenses or not. My first day here, I spent scouting and documenting most of the waterfalls so I could review each one to see which ones I liked the most. Now, did I actually take the time to review any of them? Well, no, but the thought was there if I wanted to.
I get lost looking in your eyes, a little shook up at the sight of you. It gets me every time. And when I'm swimming against the tide, you're throwing me a line, pulling me back to you.
I did save something quite important for last, but it's for a good reason. And a tripod might be obvious to many of you watching, but I've got a bit of a surprise for you, so be sure to keep watching. First, let's talk tripods. Because we're trying to utilize those longer shutter speeds to get that nice flow of water in our images, we need our camera to be stable during that time. A few tips when using a tripod for waterfalls are: first, before you even break out your tripod, find your shot. Save yourself a lot of time and messing about by choosing the exact shot you want and then adjust your tripod accordingly. Next, always extend your tripod legs out first. Even if you're trying to keep your tripod small, you're going to want these out just a little bit. This makes it so that the sand, mud, or dirt doesn't get into the important parts of your tripod legs. Once you've got your legs set up, before you're putting your camera over the water, give your tripod a little or big push into the ground. This will confirm your legs are locked while also checking the foundation of where your tripod is sitting. Anytime I'm over the water, I try to chaperone my camera very closely, even when I've checked its stability. Yes, I do have insurance through PPA in case something catastrophic does happen, but I'd prefer not to go through that. Furthermore, if you ever leave your tripod in the event you need something, or maybe you're just sitting around and waiting for the light, take your camera with you and don't leave it out there, like this, just in case. The final piece of advice here I have is that even though you're using a tripod, you're going to want to use a 2-second timer or a shutter release cable when taking your photos. This will prevent any small movements in your images once you let go of the camera to take your image. So, now, what's that bonus that I was talking about before? It's to not use a tripod at all. But this comes with a huge asterisk. I found myself taking successful long exposure images up to almost half a second handheld. However, this is only made possible by the absolutely insane stabilization in my lens and camera. On top of that, I also have to take multiple exposures of every shot to give me a higher success rate, and even then, I still get blurry images. That being said, doing this has enabled me to take compositions that just aren't possible without a tripod, like holding the camera above my head, over a ledge, or in this case, right up against the tree that was too far out and too high up to get a stable shot with my tripod. Alternatively, if you have a really tall tripod, you could add a decent amount of reliability to this using it like a monopod. I don't suggest this to anyone who doesn't have a combination of high-end modern camera and wide-angle lens. It's just not possible with anything even a couple years old.
space.
All right, that's all I have for you today. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode and keep your eyes out for some more adventures coming up. You can like the video if you liked it, consider subscribing if you loved it, and there's got to be some rainbows out there somewhere. We just got to go find them. Later.
River